Okay, so for a startup, what do you think works best when they're going out and actually getting customers? So, any thoughts or any
Well, let
recommendation?
me maybe rephrase
Yeah.
to you. I think along that lines, having closed a fund and have done fundraising funds, I think it's really difficult to fundraise. And what's your secret sauce to having done so many funds, especially in the beginning? It's
You
really
know,
hard.
there's no secret sauce. It's just hard work, and you have to perform. If you think about if we had not performed for Barry Goldware, he wouldn't have told his friends and neighbors and network about us, and you have to perform over and over. And you know we're it's luckily, we haven't lost anybody's money. Our performance has fluctuated, but we've always been positive, delivering distributions and good returns, double-digit returns to our investors. And I mean, that's the, for lack of better terms, the secret sauce that you mentioned is, and it's hard, and you just gotta grind it out, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices at first, and when you don't have a track record, the terms are not favorable to you, right? If somebody's going to give you money, there's not going to be a management fee, there's not going to be a big carried interest, and so as you prove yourself, the terms will get better and better over time. You mentioned the institutional capital raise earlier, and I think, that is attractive to some people because all your expenses are covered. You've got a big check, you've got a salary, and everything's taken care of. But when you think about incentives, I think I can't remember which professor always said this, but they're like, incentives matter, right? Well, they do. Are you incentivized by a big salary, or are you incentivized by performing and getting a big windfall at the end? And I think that's where we've really been able to attract investors, because they see that our incentives are all about getting them made whole and then making a profit, and that's when we make our money. So structuring your incentives in a way that the investor feels comfortable that, hey, you don't make money till I make money, and so that's key. And I think it is something you have to do. Like, you have to go out and talk to people, and it's a time commitment. And so if most entrepreneurs, they don't make their money raising capital. They make their money because they figured something out, right? Like in our case, we figured out how to buy and sell mineral rights in Texas, and kind of like being a market maker. I'm not a good capital raiser, but it's something we have to do, especially when you're a small team and you don't have a big track record and a lot of AUM, and people aren't, you have to go find people and talk to people, and you have long conversations, dinners and lunch.
Sometimes,
There you go.
for example, our fund, you see some, early funds, maybe up to 60% sometimes. The investors are first-time type of investors, so they're high net worth and so for us, for example, we figured out doctors actually work best for this because they get the medical science part of it for our fund, and it's a no-brainer.
Right.
No, that's a good point. Look, so to continue answering what you were saying, like, raising capital is like being a politician. I imagine. I've never been a politician, but in the sense of, maybe not any politician, but let's call it a congressman, right? Because they only have 2-year terms. And so the minute they're elected, they're probably thinking about their next election. It's kind of the same with capital raising, right? Especially when you're small. Hey, we raised a small fund, we deployed it, now I need to raise another fund. And so you're out constantly talking to people. Why is my company good? Why is this investment strategy viable? And why should you invest with us? So it's exhausting. It's just part of the game. It's something that you have to do. And that's, again, the institutional versus private capital raising avenues. It's just something that I've had to do, and we find that it works better, like for us anyway. to your point earlier about going after investors that understand your offering or your niche area of the market, we've actually found that that doesn't work as well for us. You know, especially being in Houston, everybody thinks they know better than you about oil and gas. Everybody's an energy expert and an oil and gas expert. And, you know, our asset class is real estate. And I think oil and gas folks that think they know everything about geology or engineering or whatever and how to value assets, they don't understand this very niche asset class that we're in. And this is a real estate. I mean, it literally is real estate. You can 1031 in and out of it. You get rent from the oil companies, and it's actually better than real estate in the sense that there's no vacancy risk. You know, if you invest in real estate, there is no guarantee that you will have a tenant in there. And there's also no guarantee that the amount of rent you collect will be higher than your maintenance and liabilities and your taxes, right? You've got property taxes, leaky faucets, toilets, etc. Well, our properties, that's exactly what we refer to them as, are properties. We only buy producing cash flowing assets only. So, and the way the property taxes work on mineral rights is you pay a percentage of what your royalty income is. So you're always going to be net positive. All right. And there's no liabilities. There's no leaky faucets. There's no anything. And there's no vacancy risk because the properties we buy are not at risk of getting plugged in and abandoned and you know, they're leased and producing. So the leases are held by production and they have, you know, the risk is a time value of money risk. How much product are they going to pull out of the ground and pay us in a given amount of time? And that's where the risk lies. But our worst case scenario is we get stuck holding an asset that's cash flowing, right? And so I know I went off on a tangent, but it's related because it's really hard in Houston to raise capital because almost everybody's in the oil and gas industry, right? And so everybody thinks they know better than you. Wait, that doesn't make sense. How are you, you know? And so that is a struggle. We have a handful of oil and gas folks in our fund, and they all think they know better than me, and they probably do when it comes to engineering and geology and all those things in the global energy markets, but that's not what we're doing here. We're finding assets that make sense to buy, and we're buying them. We know we can make a margin on them at some point in the future, and during our hold period, we're going to collect cash flow. It's a simple model. You know, I don't claim to be some smart genius guy that created something that's you know, amazing and that the whole world's going to buy. I could never be a tech entrepreneur, but there's a market here, and there's a lot of information asymmetry and inefficiency, and those are two characteristics of a business that you know, you'd want to have.
Yeah, so just to clarify, because I don't think we ever did, is you are operating, and you have the operating management side of your actual company as well as fundraising.
Right.
It's very different.
Yeah, it's a full-time job to say the least. Luckily, we have an awesome team at Bellatorum that you know, been able to build a team that allows me to take some of the burdens off. I don't have to micromanage the day-to-day operations because of how solid our team is.
So what has been one of your greatest challenges working with partners or people, you know, on the leadership, talking about leadership, as you've grown your company? You
know, having partners is difficult. You know, and I'm not referring to my wife. We've had several partners over the few years of Bellatorum's existence, and now it's just my wife and I, and it works best that way. I think, for us anyway, I don't think anybody is ever going to have as much commitment or skin in the game, if you will, as you, and when things get difficult, their willingness to sacrifice and do what's required of an equity partner. In my experience, you know, I haven't seen that people have that willingness. So,
what is required of an equity partner? What do you think?
Well, I mentioned selling our cars and not paying ourselves, things like that. Working on Saturday when everybody else is at home, you know, sacrificing time, money, all that, you know. And we would joke when I was in the Marine Corps, like saying everybody wants to be a Marine until it's time to do Marine Corps things like sleep in the rain or, you know, go wake up at 4 a.m. and go on a 25-mile hike. Like, with a bunch of weight on your back, So similar, everybody wants to be an equity shareholder or a partner in a company until it's time to do what partners have to do, And I've had that experience, unfortunately, where it was like, hey, I'm here busting my butt, and making sacrifices, and you may want you're leaving early on a Friday to go fishing, and it just didn't sit well with me. So that's just one example, But when it just talks about when I talk about trying to be just grinding it out when it's getting things across the finish line, I never felt that I had a partner that was willing to do that with me, except for Mary, obviously. So we've gotten to a point now where we're 100% owners of Bellatorum again, and that's the way we started in 2016, and come full circle, we're back to that, and I think that's what's works best for us.
Yeah, partnerships are hard. I hear so much grit in your story, and I love it. It takes a lot of grit and perseverance to be as successful as you are. Can you tell me how that's connected to your experience in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. The Marine Corps is the smallest branch of the military, the most expeditionary, if you will. Around the world, always deployed. There's not too many duty stations in the Marine Corps where you're not going to get sent overseas, whether that's to combat or even just peacetime. We always have a presence around the world, and so being underfunded, the smallest, and all that, it actually is very similar to being an entrepreneur, right? So there were a lot of things in the Marine Corps where they'd give me a task from my very early days as a young private, E1, to even when I was a gunnery sergeant, in my 14th year. And there were so many tasks that were like, hey, just figure it out. We don't know. We just know what needs to be done. I can't tell you how to do it or even where to get the resources to do it, but this needs to be done. And so if you think about that, having operated for 14 and a half years in that type of environment really, I think, lends well to being an entrepreneur, because I look back at some of my experiences in the Marine Corps and think, for example, I never managed interpreters. There's no school for that. But in one of my tours in Afghanistan, I was with Marine Special Operations Command. We had a task force out in Western Afghanistan, and they were like, hey, Gunny, we need somebody to manage all the interpreters. I'm like, there's no standard operating procedure. Hey, just read this book and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So I'm like creating badges and employee ID numbers and, assigning people to these different special operations team and which dialect of Farsi or Pashto does this guy speak. And it's like, that wasn't my job description. It's not like my military occupational specialty was an interpreter, manager, or anything like that. That's just one example. I mean, there were so many things where, if you think about even the global war on terrorism and going to Iraq and Afghanistan, these are unconventional wars. I mean, you could argue that very similar to Vietnam type. We have some lessons from the Vietnam War, but not in the sense of a true insurgency. Now you've got cultural, you've got the media, 24-hour media cycle. There's all these new things, and not just the Marine Corps. I don't want to take all the glory for the Marine Corps, but the entire U.S. military kind of had to figure it out as we went, and so that's very similar to entrepreneurship. I read a book last year. I can't remember the name of the book now, but basically a theme in there is like you're building the plane as you fly it when you're an entrepreneur in the early days, and I love that analogy because it's so true. Like even now, you mentioned we're on Fund 5, we still are getting more and more sophisticated on our offerings every go around. We learn new things, new laws, new tax incentives, and all these things. So we're still building the plane as we fly it. Don't let that scare any potential investors, but we're getting better constantly, every day. And I think that attitude of constantly improvement, constantly improving your position or continuous process improvement that was pounded into our head in the military is something that bodes well in entrepreneurial life.
So 14 years is a lot in your life, and tell me, what are the wars you went to? What are the countries you went to? A little bit.
Yeah, so I did several tours to Iraq and several tours to Afghanistan. I also got to visit, some other countries along the way: Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Dubai, Bahrain. I mean, I got to go a lot of places. The list goes on. Japan, Korea. The coldest. I spent the night in a warehouse in Busan, Korea, because the seat, we were on a ship, and I'm telling you this story because you obviously are Korean and have probably experienced the very cold weather there, but I never knew how cold it was there, and they have these really awesome like fuzzy blankets over there. You know what I'm talking about? Those real heavy fuzzy blankets. And then we got stuck on the pier because we'd take these little ships out back to our big ship, and we couldn't. The seas were too heavy, and it was so cold, and we had to sleep in a warehouse. And I remember all we had, we thought we were just going to go out and eat at restaurants, do some shopping, and go back. So we didn't have sleeping bags or hotel or anything reservations, and so we got a bunch of Marines sleeping on the pier with these Korean blankets that these shopkeepers came out and sold them to us, and so that was a good experience. But things like that, I have fond memories of traveling around the world. I won't get into telling war stories about Afghanistan and Iraq, but I will say that I learned a lot as a human being over there, and have a huge respect for people in that part of the world. And when people joke and say, "Oh, those are first world problems," I mean that's a true statement. We have it even with the divisiveness we're experiencing today in our country, with some of the rioting and the politics, and then COVID-19. I mean, look, we're all the three of us are sitting in here right now in an air-conditioned space in Houston, Texas, and we have it so good in this country. I mean, hands down, and could things be better? Absolutely, but our lives are so great compared to some of the hard experience and hard lives that people are still going through around the world today, that I think that was probably one of my biggest lessons in the value I got from the military, was just seeing the rest of the world and knowing, hey, no matter how bad I might have it here in the U.S., it's not even a fraction of what other people are going through to this day or have had to go through. So I'll get off my soapbox on that. But
so much respect. That's why I wanted you to highlight your time in the military.
So what advice would you give somebody that's starting out fresh, starting a business in general? We know what so far you've talked about, it's not easy, but what advice would you give them to at least try to be successful?
Couple things, right? I got this from this saying from Barry Goldware. He truly was a true coach and mentor to me. And again, I won the lottery in Rice, assigning him to our group. But he said something, and he actually didn't come up with it. I think it was the guy who founded Lifetime Fitness who said this, but his thing was, he would say, think big, start small, and move fast. All right, and that really resonated with me, and I think that's what we've done at Bellatorum. But that's kind of related to, I'll go a little more in depth in the sense of, you can't be, I shouldn't say you can't be, but in my opinion, you shouldn't be a part-time entrepreneur. If you want your business to truly be a real business, you can't just do it part-time. You've got to go all in. And, I was doing the mineral rights stuff on the side for 2 years while I worked for this other company, GMP Land. But Bellatorum didn't take off until I just said, you know what, I'm going to do this all in, full-time. And same with my wife, right? I said, hey, you need to quit your job and come all in. And Bellatorum didn't take off until we went all in, right? And it's risky. It's scary. You need to have some savings in the bank account because you're not going to be able to pay yourself. You're not going to have medical benefits unless you pay, like, you go out and buy them, which we had to do, right? Like on the open market, it's expensive. You're paying thousands of dollars a month for you and your family. I mean, so it's kind of scary, right? Somebody who's used to collecting a paycheck on the 1st and 15th of every month, that goes away. Your benefits go away. Vacation, paid vacation, there's no such thing. When you're not, at least in the early days, until you create a business that can operate without you, if you're not working, you're not making money, right? And so it's hard to take a vacation when you think, man, if I leave the business for a week or two, that's really going to hit our bottom line, And so you have to just be willing to do those things. There's no other way to say it. It's just, hey, take the leap of faith, go all in. If you believe in your business plan and your model, then just go after it. Don't, is the timing right? Or do I have enough money? Or, this timing is never right. It's like having kids, right? You have kids, I have 2 sons, and you're like, oh, we're going to time the pregnancy to where it's just right and everything's perfect. There's no such thing. It's the same with business, right? There's not a perfect time where everything's just going to be easy and whatever. And I've got one of my team members, Doug. He always says, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it, and it's so true. If you want the easy road, then your entrepreneurship is not where you need to be if you're looking for easy. So
what you're saying is, if somebody wants to start a business, they have to sacrifice their comfort. The system or the overall environment is going to be pushing everything against them, and they'll pretty much have to sacrifice everything that they actually value at the time.
Yeah, relationships, money, time, everything. And I think it's worth it in the end. And you asked a question earlier, there are going to be bumpy times where you're questioning, like, man, is this worth it? But I think it's worth it in the end, at least for me. Everybody's different, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. There's a place and a time and a role for everyone to play in this world, and for me, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Let me ask you some of the speed questions, right? So whatever comes in your mind, the first thought comes to your mind, just speak it, just say it out loud.
Okay.
All right, one thing you like about being an entrepreneur?
Is there a time limit? Maybe the freedom. Okay.
If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Just work.
Just work.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think Nike was just do it, right? Similar. So many people sit around just thinking about what could be or whatever. Just get out and work. Just do it, Yeah. And you can't use just do it because Nike owns that. So I'll just say just work,
You should trademark it. If you could remove all barriers and constraints and wanted to do a project, and that project would define you and your legacy, what would that project be?
It's already we've planted the seeds, but we have the Bellatorum Foundation, and man, it is really hard for veterans, especially enlisted veterans, to get out of the military and find meaningful employment, even though we have the skill sets and everything we need to go out and be contributors to organizations or even entrepreneurs. It's very difficult, and the cards are kind of stacked against you, and so I would love the Bellatorum Foundation to grow into what I've envisioned it to be, and we're nowhere near there yet, but where we can take veterans fresh out of the military and really help them transition. There's a lot of transition programs out there right now, but in my opinion, they're lacking in some departments. While they do a lot of good work, and I don't want to take away from them, I would do things a little differently. And so that would be my project. If budget were not an issue and time were not an issue, that's what I would like to focus on.
So would you would like to tell the audience how can they donate to your foundation?
Yeah, there's just bellatorum.org and not bellatorum.com. Our foundation is bellatorum.org, and then our company is bellatorum.com. But there's a donation button on the website. And right now, what we do with those donations is we take that money and donate it to causes that we vetted, where we know that 100% of the funds are going to make a true impact, and not 1% of the funds, and the other 99% running overhead. So we really make targeted contributions right now, and that's all we do. But ideally, the Bellatorm Foundation would grow to where we pull in veterans and we literally train them on business and everything, bring them in every day, help them write their resume, train them on specific skill sets, and that's hopefully when I can retire from buying and selling mineral rights, I could do that full time. So.
Well, that sounds really amazing how you're helping. I think part of being an entrepreneur is not just making money for the investors, keeping your employees on the job, and but also actually doing something that's going to make a difference in somebody's life and overall, even after you're gone. Maybe Bellatorm Foundation lives on and makes the difference that you would actually dream of. Well,
thank you.
We would like to thank you for being on our podcast, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we had a really special guest today. We interview entrepreneurs and investors, but you hit both of them.
Yeah.
So really great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure to be here, and always happy to help out fellow owls. So love the Rice Network. You guys are doing great things as well. Keep it up.